All right, so my name is Aaron Lawrence. I'm a product designer here at Labs. I've been here for about 2 years. Today is Tuesday, September 1st. It's a big day for me. This was, rewind 10 years ago, this was the day I was going to college to become a designer, see what it was like to be a designer. So that marks my 10-year reunion. I want to give a little background about what I've done, what I've learned. Being at Labs, I just want everybody to know, what I've learned at Labs is equivalent to all the schooling and all the in-house on-job experience I've had prior to Labs. And I probably bet we all feel similar to that. So I've learned a lot. I've started my career working in advertising, doing packaging design, posters, and ads. Really what it meant was I was designing things that were getting thrown in the trash by people. It's okay. You get experience. I'm really, really lucky now that I get to design things that hopefully people enjoy and use. So today I want to talk a little bit about a practice we have at Labs that helps us identify how people want to use and engage with products. It's called discovery and framing. This is a process where we help clients define their product goals by conducting research, getting insights, getting to a level of gaining understanding, being able to understand enough to create a concept or a solution to test, all leading to hopefully validation and validated user stories that we can bring engineers and the rest of the team in to start actually building this product. It's a process that is practiced across all of our companies or all of our offices. It's really, really essential, and we're finding it more essential for most of the projects coming in here at Labs, especially new offices and transformation projects as well. So the presentation I'm about to show everybody, it's not a how-to guide about doing a discovery and framing. It's more of an opportunity for me to share my individual experiences and most importantly the learnings of what we have here called discovery and framing. Also, I get a lot of engineers that come to me and ask me, what's that? Mike good? Good?
Going analog. Thank you, sir.
So yeah, I was saying, this isn't a how-to guide, it's more just an opportunity to share my learnings, share my individual experiences. Also for engineers, I've had a lot of engineers ask me, what is a DNF? What goes on in a DNF? So I also have some context about what a DNF is and some of the processes we do in a DNF. So let's go ahead and kick off. So when should you do a DNF? When should you suggest a DNF? Really when there's no clear product definition or the product hasn't been validated yet. This is the delivery of a DNF, a discovery and framing. We're looking at delivering value through engagement. What does value mean? Value means something useful. It means identifying needs and solving a problem. Engagement is about participation. It's about making something compelling. It's participation while creating interest in an experience. There's different schedules of the DNF. We usually start with some research, which gains to some understanding, which gains to framing and design, which leads us to testing, which may lead us to validation and inception. We have back arrows here, because you can jump around at any point. You might learn something in testing that you may need to go back and re-understand before you can properly frame that. Before you start a DNF, I found that a lot of our clients come in and they usually have little to no information about what to expect day to day on a discovery and framing. So I found if you walk the team through a DNF experience slideshow, more importantly, just pulling out, like showing the pictures, explaining the process, and showing the schedule, this helps them give some context to what to expect in the next 4 weeks. This is really crucial to include your stakeholders as well. They'll get a better understanding of what to look for in this process as well. So what does that mean, doing a DNF? What it means for product, it means that we're going to build empathy. We're going to do that by doing assumption validation, exploratory research, gaining insights and context, doing framing and testing, ultimately leading to some user stories that have been validated and having an inception. What does that mean for the greater business, for the stakeholders? That means that we're mitigating risk. We're going to try to build the right product for the right person. Here's kind of what that looks like. We have the product in the middle, and we have the business sector around us. It's really crucial at the beginning to tell your stakeholders that this is what risk mitigation looks like. It looks like sticky notes. So when they walk in the office and they see a bunch of sticky notes everywhere that look like a big chaos of mess, it's actually understood that that's the insights we're gaining and the knowledge we're gaining to design the right product, to find the right users. It's also important that we explain to stakeholders in the business and clients that we don't control the research, we control the research methods. We don't control the outcomes. Insights reveal opportunities. If you need to quickly draw out what a DNF process is going to do and how it helps in risk mitigation, I draw this graph a lot. You can see that the big red arrow is designing and going forward in time without stopping to do due diligence or to validate the decisions that you made. So we'd rather approach the more MVP tactic, which is to start with a little bit of risk, but during our validation work and our due diligence, we actually decrease risk and eventually move forward in time without going too far up on that risk ladder. The different types of discovery and framings that come in the door here are, we have consumer for new market and existing market, and what that means is usually user has a choice. We have internal discovery and framings for also new markets. Most of them are more in the existing market. And what that means is, does the user have a choice? Here's a schedule. I'm going to skip it and come back if we need to. Create a Tumblr blog and start capturing the process and the day-to-day activities on day one. This will be really helpful to come back as an artifact tool to use to pull for your inception. It's also on other projects moving far in the future. You're going to come back to this Tumblr blog to look at things that you've done and revisit those processes. I also wanted to thank Michelle, who's right there. I'm going to point her out. She actually is the one that created this. And we've actually used it as a deliverable in some projects. Some big enablement projects, at the end, having this Tumblr blog for them to revisit and re-practice the techniques that we taught them was really, really valuable. It also helps in stakeholder management. So at any point, a stakeholder can open up and fire up the Tumblr blog and see what's currently happening on the team and what that looks like. Also, before you really start a DNF, make sure your clients understand that we're going to need users right away to talk to, so set them up. Plant that seed to go find users, start setting up potential interviews. Usually you don't want to surprise them with day one because it can take a few weeks or a week to find actual interviewees to interview. All right, so out of the research, the understand, the frame, the testing, and the validation, and the inception, we're going to start with some research and some learnings there. So to start, it's really important to know the stories and the scenarios. They contain the human with a problem or activity in a real-world context. So when you hear requirements, you hear features get thrown at you, backtrack them to where they came from. A lot of times, sometimes we'll hear feature requirements came from the business sector. So we want to make sure that this is clearly coming from a story and not necessarily a requirement. We want to align on goals quickly. We want to make sure we have a shared vocabulary as soon as possible as well. There's a designer, Pam, here somewhere who came up with the analogy FAB, which is to find rhythm, align with the team, and build trust. So that's something that you're doing right away in the project. Out of that story, you're going to pull out your current assumptions, if you have future assumptions, and you're going to prioritize those assumptions, and that's what you're going to be tackling during research. You're looking to validate or invalidate these assumptions. I'm going to quote Erica Hall. She has a really good representation of the goal of research. So you can always tell your clients, the goal of research is we're going to capture reactions. We're going to know how people react to content, how they engage with content. We're going to identify their behaviors. I want to know if I meet somebody on the street and I hang out with them, based off their behaviors, I should know this person is a persona of mine or a customer of mine. We're also going to shine light on the unknown. So look at research efforts as exactly what it is, a piece of time that we can use and utilize to figure out anything we need to figure out. So shining light on the unknown is really just coming up with answers about your questions. The first learning, one of the big first learnings while I was at Labs. I phrased it in the form of Kung Fu. I don't know if you guys remember the old 70s series television show. But this is David Carradine, and that's his master. And he always revisits the times he shared with his master to grow and to learn about these new adventures and problems that he's finding. So the first one is regarding behavior. It's not what people like, it's what they do that matters. I could say I like horses all day. But again, I'm not going out riding horses, actively looking to engage with horses. I like them. They're nice. Okay, back to the goal. So the goal here is we have a person. In this case, it's Bob Raccoon. And over here we have real-world context. The further we are and the further the gap is from here, the more assumptions we're making about the product, the real-world context, or this individual who's known as Bob Raccoon. So we want to validate the story during research. We want to get really close to Bob, understand that Bob's really a guy named Bob in a raccoon costume, and this is his real-world context and all the dynamics that happen within Bob's life, his motivations, his needs, his current pains. Another learning from Grasshopper is that features and solutions come from stories about people. Cool, so let's go ahead and kick off research. It's important to be organized to your activities. So the very beginnings of a board that you could use, or a Trello tracker, you could do this in Tracker too, is to do, doing, and done. It's the most simplest way to figure out who's doing what they're doing, and what's been done already. Another learning here is during research, we know we use screeners, we check blog posts and forums are helpful as well. But I want to point out, if you do use Craigslist, have a pre-phone interview with this person before you just let them in the office. You may get this guy who's smelly and is not the person you want to interview. So before they come in on those Craigslist ads, just call them up, talk to them for a little bit, evaluate them, and then invite them in. The next thing is, if you do heavy recruiting on a project, create an Excel file to track all the interview contact points and their appointments, as well as their payment statuses. I'll show you what that looks like. This can get really confusing after a lot of research and a lot of people being contacted. So you want the name of the interviewee, their email, their phone, about them, any information we need to know, their time zone, their origin, who contacted them, their location, were they contacted, yes or no, who were they contacted by, what's the status, what's the action we need to take, and was there sent payment, and was payment confirmed. So every time you get an interviewee, put them into this document and track their progress as they go. All right, another learning. Again, I've made all these mistakes, and that's why I'm up here to share them, to make sure that if anybody else here is going to make this mistake, at least we can learn from each other and not make these mistakes. I used to ask questions that were too deep. I would drill in too fast and not go high level and open-ended. So a question like, what do you use your iPad for? That's too soon, dog. It's better to start with, how do you engage with technology? What do you use most? Why? So the top question, I'm making an assumption that somebody already uses an iPad. This, I'm letting somebody naturally progress to what they use and what they value the most. So spark conversations around scenarios, activities, real-world context, pains and joys, first time, last time, best time, worst time, and the wish list. The wish list is you have a magic wand, anything you want. You ask this usually at the end of an interview, and you'll get some really good information about what people are looking for. Conversation prompts. So these are things you can say if you need somebody to start talking or have a conversation. You could say, have you ever had an experience where, describe your scenario? Can you tell me that story from beginning to end? And then what happened? Ask a lot of why and how did you do that? What did you love or hate the most? And if you could wave a magic wand, what would the world be like? So in an interview, it's best to smile, ask open-ended questions, really focus on the story, get their stories. Be quiet and listen, ask a lot of how, what, and why. So here's what you don't do. Talk about your product, talk the entire time, ask leading questions, ask about future behaviors, ask, do you like it? Remember, I like horses, doesn't matter. Would you use it? I'm not actively using or riding horses, so no. Sell, and lots of yes and no questions. Here's a big insight that I learned actually recently. So if you frame your questions with the beginning to start with how and why, you'll usually lead to stories. If you frame it with do and is, you'll probably get a yes and no, right? So, do you like Kool-Aid? Yeah. Okay, cool. Why do you like Kool-Aid? Oh, it's a nostalgic drink that I drank as a kid, and although it's gross and lots of sugar, I just like it. All right, I find myself using this intro all the time, so I decided to share it. The intros may vary, but at a very basic level, this is what you're saying in an intro. And some of the interviews, the real secret is the intro. That's where you're going to start with getting somebody in that comfort zone, allowing them to say whatever they feel and be honest. So in the intro, I first start by introducing myself or the note taker. I'll let them know how long the interview will take. I'll state the goal is just to have a discussion about their experiences with whatever that is. 7-Eleven Slurpees, Kool-Aid. So I want them to know, too, that there's no right or wrong answers to any questions. I say this a lot. The only right answer is your opinion. Let him or her know there's nothing they say will offend you, and feel free to ask questions. Let them know to feel free to ask questions at any point. Let them know also they'll have time at the end, about 5-10 minutes at the end, to answer to have any questions for us as well. Ask, do you have any questions before we begin, and go ahead and start the interview. When you start the interview, get the story. If you're really looking for information about 7-Eleven Slurpees, and somebody's given you a story about going to the mall, and somewhere in that story they stopped at 7-Eleven and got a Slurpee, don't stop them. Let them keep going. Get the entire story, and then say, oh, we'll go back. You said you stopped at 7-Eleven and got some Slurpees. Tell me about that. Why did you do that? How did you do that? So that's called the dive. So you take the deep dive, get the story, find out where you need to dive in, do the dive, go back up, continue the next story. When you're interviewing for the note takers, capture insights and notes directly on stickies and keep them in order. You can keep them in order by putting them upside down, sticky side facing up. This makes synthesis super easy because when you go back to synthesize, all of your notes and your insights are already captured on stickies, and they're the order of the interview as well. All right, so you start doing some interviews, start getting some information in, start gut checking everything. Are we getting the right evidence? Are we talking to the right users? Are we asking the right questions? If you're not getting the right evidence, you may be updating the script too many times and not getting clear patterns. You may have the wrong persona or person. You may lack priority, trying to learn too much about everything. Or we're wrong and we need to pivot. If you're unsure if you're talking to the right user, you can use the user totem pole. The one at the top is going to be the closest to our persona. And all the other interviews that you felt may have not been this closest to our persona, call out those distinctions so we can focus on who we still need to interview and what are the things that we still have unknowns about. The distinctions, you can map them through a behavior or empathy map. These are what people and humans do. We do things, we hear things, we think, we speak, we feel. So you can map some of those distinctions there based off of that. All right, so that concludes a little bit of the research. Now we're going to focus on what it takes to understand and what that means. So in the beginning of doing DNFs, like the first week, I would talk about solutions, which would confuse my clients about, wait, are we supposed to be finding the problem or are we finding the solution? What are we doing here? So it's really, really important that you make the discussion centered around the problem during the very beginnings of the DNF. The goal is to gain as much understanding about the problem and frame it within its context. You want to steer conversations about solutions and systems back to the user and the problems. You'll find this a lot when we go into other companies' offices. They like to talk a lot about like data solutions and system solutions during a research project. So that's okay. Whenever they do, just point them back to the problem and the user, and you'll find they'll naturally start to talk more about the problem and the user. Why we do this? The solutions are a dime a dozen. They're all over the place. It's really hard to identify a problem and to be aligned on that problem as a team and to move forward in a clear possible direction. So synthesis. These are what I call sticky buckets. It is a sticky note of each color representing a user. So we have one user, a second user, and a third user that we've interviewed. When you do this, I found it's helpful if you summarize your learnings on the top row with each stickies. This helps if anybody pops into the project, you can easily walk them through your research of what you've learned. It also has a shared understanding of what all this research and what this particular topic meant, and it keeps a shared perspective of that problem or that information that we're using to go forward. All right, the cluster. This is when we take all those stickies and we cluster them into topics. So here you can see we have a big cluster called technology. When you do this, it's really important that you involve your stakeholders. This is when all of the research insights, all of the knowledge and the noise really come together, and we synthesize and make sense out of all of this. So we start by putting the topics into a general topic called, your insights into a general topic called, in this case, technology. Once you get a whole bunch of stickies in technology bucket, you can start stripping them out into subtopics called desktop, mobile, tablet, etc. Then summarize your cluster too. Same deal, it helps. It will help everybody with that shared understanding, easy, fast way to review. Another way is you could dot each sticky note as well with like an example here, pains, insights, and request. You can dot them with any sort of category you want, but it's another sort of hierarchy synthesis method that you could use. Now here's the key. We've made some assumptions at the very beginning that we prioritized at research to see if we validated or invalidated these assumptions. So go back to them. They should probably already be on stickies. If not, rewrite them on stickies and use a validation map. This can serve as an artifact to come back to as well. You want to put priority at the top of all of your assumptions. The middle line means that we're right in the middle. We don't know if it's validated or invalidated. And then we're going to toss them further right means it's pretty solid that this has been invalidated, and further left means that we have conclusive evidence that this has been validated. All right, so now we have the problem. We want to frame the problem in its context. We can use the business model canvas. And here's where it all comes together. This is sort of the path that we pave in discovery and framing. And I'm calling it the truth trail. I may take some feedback on this a little later, but it's all about as you move forward, you're leaving a trail of truth. And it's important that we capture that trail. So first of all, it's how do we receive the information? This is about conducting research methods, getting information that we need to help us make decisions. The next one is more of the consulting aspect of this. This is how we communicate the information. So this is communication and consulting, teaching how and why we do certain methods and activities. How we execute this information. So this is product and design. So using design to help us execute and also learn more. So as you move forward in this process, you can either document this or make this clearly understood with the team of that shared sense of knowledge, that we have information, we have how we communicate that information, and we have how we execute that information. I'll sum this up. I have a little talking point here about we found on a project that adult music learners enjoy playing popular songs and watching certain YouTube videos of how to learn how to play those popular songs. How we communicate this to the client was why did we look for this information and how did we find it? So we went looking for this information to learn patterns about online music education to help identify an opportunity for new engagement. We conducted in-person and remote interviews to identify these learning behaviors. We also did some search term analysis on YouTube to determine what were the top search videos and what is the content in those videos. If there are patterns, what are the patterns of content that are suggesting that there's a better quality of video type? So we did find evidence that there was content that led to more clicks, and that content had patterns on other videos that had good track records as well. So the execution of that is we believe our video content should have similar characteristics to the videos with good track records. All right, so we're going to get into Frame a little bit. So now we have an understanding, we can frame now. So we can write the potential solution. So remember how I said don't talk about solutions? Well, guess what? Now you can go crazy, go nuts. Here's your time to test. Talk about solutions. But do it in a way in the form of a story. Write it in a story, because then you can pull out scenarios and you can create value props and feature ideas from that story. This will also help to sketch. So if you want to have the room come in and sketch, you can pull a quick scenario, have people sketch that scenario. All right, what are we doing in framing land? These are the levels of design validation we face. So we've done some research. Research helps us identify the business, helps us identify the problem, gives us insights on the user, fills us up with design knowledge to make decisions on behalf of the user to test with. Second to that is where we're at now. We're in the concept phase. This is a lot about the solution architecture or solving the problem. And below that, we have the interaction about how it works. And further from that, we have the engagement, the delight, the visual design, the touch points. And then underneath that, we have the metrics, so the quantitative, how do we learn? Here's another way to look at that too. We've already understood the desirability. Now we're looking at the feasibility. Is it technical feasible? Is it viable? Does it achieve the business goals? And right in the middle there is our solution or concept. So the concept is a visual way of telling a story. I have two references here, one without concept, one with concept. So I'll share both of those with you. We're going to start with the one without. So the goal of this webpage is so you can find drug interactions. So if you take multiple drug prescriptions and you're possibly going to take a new drug, you want to know if there's an interaction that could cancel out one of your prescriptions. So I don't know, I'm just going to type in some things here. I'm taking this drug here, and I'm going to take, let's say, alcohol. No interactions found. Cool, so I did 2 drugs here, no interactions found. I can save it. As far as engagement goals, I'm just looking at a form. I'm typing something in. The interaction is showing me, here's some component pieces. I can cancel these, and I can research. Nothing really there conceptually for me to chew on. This one is called Safe Meds and was designed by the team here at Labs, and they did an amazing job. There's 2 of the engineers sitting right in the front there that worked on it, and Pam, I want to give a shout out to as well, worked on it, wherever she's at. But that's a concept. It's a visual way of telling the story, right? So here I'm currently taking Ambien. And now I'm going to take alcohol. And what do you think is going to happen? Yeah, all right, so let's check it. You see that? It's coming together like it's in your belly. Uh-oh. Interactions are bad. So you go through, you find all the interactions. But that's a concept, right? So it's really, really coming down to what's the way to solve this and how are we going to solve it. The goal is to gain clear definition on the best way to apply the content hierarchy. Really what I'm saying is, what's the best workflow? What's the best framework? And I'm going to go back to this. The reason why this is important is it's okay to end a DNF with some still having fine-tuned interactions and some unknowns in some areas, but you don't want to end a DNF with 3 or 4 multiple unvalidated workflows that you're unsure of how people want to engage. All right, so the information architecture, break down the content order and then come up with ways to experiment and gain understanding on how the users want to engage and prioritize with this information. Prioritization is key. All right, so another thing is generative research. I learned this from Kim. Another shout out for Kim for finding all the methods. So while we're working, she's in the front line figuring out all these cool methods we could do and setting us up for success by learning these methods so that when we get into these unknown battles, we can use these tools that we have, these intellectual tools, to help us find the problem and help us get to a solution. One of the things Kim taught me was generative research. This is when you get users to show you how they want something to look and behave. And this was helpful in a current project in Palo Alto where people were receiving messages in their browser from their internet company. We needed to know what type of messages and how to position those messages. What do they look like for each type? So we gave people paper, different sizes of paper, markers, and we had them design their messages based off what they wanted. And we found really clear patterns on what would be a virus message versus your bills late message. And it helped us position that to the client. Freaking paper anything. Just do it. It is like the best tool we have. Paper prototype, words on a paper, sketches, blank paper. Hands down, paper is the best method to test concepts and content hierarchy. All right, so you tested the concept, you have some workflows developed, you figured out how people want to engage with this content and what the priority is. Now we have the interaction, the real guts of this. How does this whole thing work? What are the edge cases? What are the error cases? What's the system? What's the recipe that makes up our product? When you're designing, I always tell my PM that I'm going to design the absolute best experience I can, without a doubt. But I'm going to jump off the cliff. Don't worry. I'll throw you a rope. So I do want to go off the cliff. I want to go as best as I possibly can, but they have a rope, so at some point they may say, whoa, and they may pull you back. But it's better to jump off the cliff and explore than to never, ever get close to it at all. Yeah, I see you laughing over there. You probably didn't throw Addison a rope. All right, on the time box. This is important because this is what we're battling. We're battling against time and freedom to explore. So it's important to time box things, understand where you're at, have daily, weekly gut checks. All right, so the screens. It's best to sketch whiteboard before jumping onto the machine. The pencil, the marker, it's the best tools we got. Another thing I found helpful is if you gather the team into a room and do a sketch workshop, this is your engineers, anybody you can find, even people not even on the project. Just pull them into a room, give them the scenarios, the stories, have them sketch how they feel the UI or this wireframe or system should work, go very broad, and then you can run off as the designer and think about things, and it's, again, all for your suggestions. You may run off with some or you may not, but the goal is you'll get a good level of ideas to start from. Have the team look around and share interactions that solve the same current problem. Look at different applications, look at different UI behavior. Sounds super obvious, but when we're all sharing an inspiration, it helps design a lot. I threw this in. This is a technique that I used before on responsive. So if you're doing a responsive site and you're confused on how to design a responsive site, there's an easy way to use the grid patterns. When we look at responsive grid making, we end up with a lot of technical frameworks, and they use like 12 to 14 grids. And from a design point, it's just a lot to chew on. So if you set up 3 grids, each grid representing the width of an iPhone, doesn't have to be exact dimensions, but more just layout-wise, is the width of the iPhone. 2 widths, you have about the width of an iPad. 3 widths, you have the landscape width of the iPad. And again, 3 widths and the iPad, you have the desktop width as well at 1024. So you can see at 1024, I have the same layout for my desktop and for my landscape tablet. As I go to portrait view, one of the cards or one of the pieces of content is going to either scrunch or fall in the order. After that, you can imagine squishing all this content into the mobile. You'll get an extended portion of this text here, may go to 5 lines, and these will actually shift underneath. So it's a very beginning way to talk about responsive design and how responsive design works. In the industry, they say start with mobile first. I disagree with that. I think you should do tablet and mobile and desktop first, figure it out, and then move on mobile and desktop together as you go. So as you're designing mobile, go back to desktop, iterate off desktop, go to mobile, but you shouldn't do one path and then go do the next path. All right, in wireframing, it's best to remind yourself the goal of each screen and section. Focus on the interactions and how it informs content. It's not about the visual design here, it's about content interaction. Use character styles, global colors, and symbols. That makes it really easy to change multiple pieces in your application through one element, so not having to go page by page and make changes. Do design reviews, check in with stakeholders, get granular, understand the edge cases. Stop and share with an engineer. If you're working on a DNF and it's you and a PM, grab an engineer, share the complexity with them. They'll give you some insights pretty early on. Think MVP and use the right fidelity needed to achieve goals. Here's the fidelity ladder. So if you want to communicate a workflow, you could do it by a bullet list, you can do it by story writing, you can do it by diagramming, you can do storyboarding. Storyboarding works really well if you have sort of the lifespan of a Facebook message, because it goes to multiple thousands of people. Storyboarding works really good for that kind of interaction where you can capture multiple people doing different things with the same message. You have sketching, you have paper prototyping, you have wireframing, and you have prototyping. So at any point, you can choose what you need to communicate on and what's the most effective way of communicating this goal. The wireframe, don't do. Get stuck in the weeds. Do wild, crazy interactions that bring no user value. I love that stuff, but I'm going to do that outside of work on my own time when I want to. Next to that is to start on high fidelity design. You don't want to go real quick to high fidelity. You definitely don't want to wait till everything's 100% perfect before testing. User testing is like having kids. You're never ready, just do it. Wait until everything's 100% before showing your PM or showing anybody else. Don't just run off in a dark corner and do a bunch of designs and then show up and, hey guys, I'm back from the dead and I got designs. Be very open with your process. You'll get a better understanding and you'll catch more of the leakages or the holes in the system. Here's the most important one I find out of the don'ts. Being indecisive. So exploring and not making decisions. It's probably it's a time killer. If you're going to explore, understand what you're exploring, why you're exploring it, and go back and make those decisions on why you either continued exploring or stop that exploration. The worst is just going around like a crazy train. Don't break UI behaviors as well. The wireframes are not half-assed design. They're well thought out designs that look polished. The reason why we do them is that users are more willing to give us honest feedback on something that looks unfinished or unpolished or even, may I say, crappy. All right, so during the testing, here's some things I've learned. It's okay to make mistakes. We're dealing with unknowns. Making many mistakes. It's only a mistake if you never identified it's a mistake, right? So as soon as you make a mistake, you identified it was a mistake, it's no longer a mistake. It's an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to grow and get better knowledge on what you're doing. It's like Bob Ross said it. There was a video where he was painting a canvas, and he made a mistake. He actually hit it with a brush stroke and was like, oh. And he goes, look, I made a mistake. We all do that. And then he took another color, and he goes, look, it's a bird now. Right? So, make the mistakes. Here's the key, though. If you make a mistake and you hear it, don't run off and react immediately after receiving one data point in an interview. Get a few in. Validate that it's a bad data point. All right, I like this one. This is kind of like the fake it till you make it thing. So here I want to know what's the information somebody wants to use. How do they want to... what's the content they want there, how do they want to engage with that content, and what's the priority of that content. So what I'll do is I'll make 2 mocks. I'll show one that has no content, and I'll show the other one that has content. And during the interview, I don't want the guy or the gal to know that I'm the designer, because then I want them to be honest with me. So I'll actually say my designer forgot it. I'll be like, oh, stupid designer, forgot the freaking content on this page. And I'll go, oh, whatever. Hey, what do you want there, right? And I'll get their expectation first. And then after I get their expectation, I'll go, oh, you know what? Oh, there it is. I'm a tricky designer. I found it. And I'll show them that, right? And I'll get feedback. This helps because you'll get an idea of how people want to engage with content. You'll also get an idea of how people prioritize that content. All right, the walkthrough line is the best opening line ever. So a user opens up a screen or sees something new. All you say is, walk me through this screen. Tell me what everything means to you. Let them go off. They talk out loud. The best line, I know. It's a good line. After that, the user may get more involved in interacting with the component, so they go to click or tap on a button. Before they do that, ask them, what is that? So make sure it's clear that they understand what that button's conveying. What do you think it will do? Make sure it's clear that that conveyance of what the button will do is there. Once they tell you that, there's usually an awkward silence because they don't know if they should interact with it, and you just say, okay, great. Awkward silence, they'll eventually start interacting with it. All right, your truth trail. So remember that earlier? So come back to it. This is kind of what it looks like, but in reality, as like a few weeks goes by and 3 weeks goes by, this thing's like, it's crazy and it has lots of things, but at the end you end up with a good understanding of where you were at, all the points of expiration. The trick is, again, communicating that to your client. Why are we doing this? Why are we iterating? Why are we learning and moving? All little pieces that happen day to day that you don't really realize. If you get into a meeting room with clients, write the goal right on the board immediately, right? What we're trying to do. When can we leave the room? What are we looking for in this meeting? And more importantly to that, why we're having that meeting. Strategy. Design like a scientist, decide like a lawyer. If you think that way and you get questioned about your decisions on a certain design, just think you're a lawyer. Go back to the evidence and it will help you in these conversations. So body language, you see somebody lean in, they may like it. You see somebody lean back, they may not like it. You see somebody lean back and fold their arms, they don't like you. The verbiage, so if you're showing people your wireframes and they start calling things in the wireframe different verbiage than what's in the wireframe, you can change that. It's pretty easy to change text in your wireframe. It's hard to rechange interactions. That's something that I find really helpful. And also the verbiage you develop during research, share that with the marketing sector of the business. It will help them identify better ways to how to talk to their customer as well. All right, validation. This is what it's all about. It's all about when the team aligns on decisions and product goals that are informed by research and testing. The thing we're looking for here is it's really important that we have a truth, and we have an aligned truth. What is a truth? A truth's a strong opinion that's developed by research that's shared amongst a bunch of people in the product. This will help us move forward, and it will help us make decisions on behalf of users and not opinions or within the org itself. Again, you're going to cluster the same way. I'll move on from this. Same process as researching. This time you're showing people things, so you make cluster within a topic. Just like I did earlier with technology, I may start with a very broad topic, home screen, and then I may pull from that home screen like button verbiage, value prop, or people don't like to scroll. All right, so from there you can start to define your MVP features, your epics, and think about what's validated or still not validated. Starting to think about inception here, or what we need to go back and continue to validate. So you got your inception. Create a document to share during that inception that tells the quick story of the DNF, like 10 pages tops. This is where you could use Tumblr again. You're going to come back and have pictures of all the artifacts and the processes that we've done. You can use that as a tool. Capture the original goals, capture new goals, capture the assumptions validated, how many people we interviewed, do some top learnings, and then share your persona and have links to the wireframes or the stories that we have. Here's an example of one. So here's an assumption. Amateur songwriters want feedback, invalidated. Here's an idea of a road that we went on a path where we found different people looking for problems, and this kind of follows you the guideline. Or the roadmap, we went that way, went back, focused on other people, eventually found a problem that had some compelling evidence to it. All right, that's it. That's all I got. I'll open it up. Questions, unless everybody wants to play ping pong. Mikey.
Do you ever discover in this process that like software is not going to solve the problem, and what do you do in that event?
We just had one like that. We had one called Project Dolly. Yeah. Oh yeah. Repeat the question. Another learning. When somebody asks you a question in an interview or like in my position, repeat the question. So the question was, have you ever done a DNF and learned that the solution was not really software? And yes, we've had the solution be software, but the end-to-end goal of a user was actually a piece of paper. So they would use software, but the outcome was a catalog that they could use to go buy RAMs. But lots of other cases I'm sure other designers could share there. Lenny, did you?
Do you have we been doing this long enough that we have any sort of data on how successful the projects are after DNF?
Yeah, so I'm not sure at a high level if anybody in the company is like going back out and repeat the question again. Thank you, Phil. Lenny was asking, after we do a lot of DNF work, a lot of projects, we get very involved, we become a family with them, and then we take the trainings wheels off and we like launch and we see you guys and we never hear from them again. So he's wondering, do we ever like reach out, see how those design decisions we made during research affected the launch? What were the metrics? Were we seeing good signs? I've had a few. It's been my experience has been I've just become friends and families with the clients that we have, that I've opened up an open level of communication as the project launches, and they let me know what's going on. I've heard some products do very well, but the support wasn't so good. Which makes me think, well, was the product all that good if it was bringing support? And I've also had ones where they're like, hey, we're in the media and we're in the newspaper in our town. And so, yeah, it's pretty cool when you hear the good things. But more importantly, to hear where we can learn from as well and bring it back to the org, I think is where you're leading at.
Do you have any suggestions for how to adapt the DNF process to projects where the clients are businesses rather than consumers?
I missed the last part of that.
Where the client is other businesses rather than consumers.
So the question was, how do we adopt the DNF process for clients that are B2B for business end? Treat them the same way. I mean, if you're looking at B2B, it's a business to business. The business is still a client, it's still a customer. I typically have got more B2B to Cs, and the way I start there is start with the customer, inform your business client, inform our business, go back around, and always go user-centric first. So I said the question of that is, even though it is an internal or business to business, and there may not be you think is like a consumer or user, they're still a user. And as long as you stay user-focused and user-centric, do that. But how we adopt the different processes, that's kind of why I'm up here today, is there's a lot of different flavors of DNFs, and you're dealing with unknowns, and you don't have a trajectory that's follow X, Y, Z, and you'll end up with the path. It's very much, here's the knowledge I know today, here's the tools I have, and what do I need to know to set us up for tomorrow, and here's the tools I'm going to do and the exercises I'm going to, processes I'm going to use. So I think we're still kind of working on how to get a piece that we could say XYZ and utilize that for other pieces of DNFs.
Do you think it's sufficient to pull in an engineer as needed, or do you think DNFs might benefit from having an engineer from the beginning?
So should you bring in an engineer as needed for DNF, or should they be involved with you the entire time? I think both, right? Like, I think from the business side, if I was a client paying money, I'd want the engineer as needed, just pop in and get some feedback. But I find that from building empathy, it's really important that your engineers are involved in DNFs. I know John in the back, he was part of a DNF during the last project. And when you're writing code, especially you're writing front end, you need to have that empathy as well to shine on that customer, how they're going to engage with this product. But the other thing I can see helpful from engineering is you guys have startups, projects on the side, little things you like to do. And we're always asking, like, well, what's the problem? How come people aren't using my product? How can I get validation as an engineer? And I think it's a really important tool to learn if one of us ever become a startup or want to do our own thing. This is the knowledge you'll need to learn to help mitigate your own risk. Okay. Oh, I got one more. Thanks.
Going through this whole process, you're obviously an expert at it now. But when our clients show up, they know DNF and how do you get them to buy in early on in this long process?
Ooh. I think you have to. So human behavior changes from the heart, not the mind, right? So I think the clients, you can't really tell them, like, hey, you're wrong, and I'm going to go research. They kind of have to really come to that aha moment to themselves. Hey, a lot of times clients think about a lot of things for a while. They come in and meet with us, and we go, wow, you've been thinking about this a lot, have you? And they're like, yeah. And we're like, cool, because those are all assumptions. And they start to realize, oh, my God, I am knowledgeable enough to know that I don't know what I'm doing. And that's why I'm here with you guys. So I think when you hear more of that, those are good signs of a client will play well in the DNF. When you hear like, no, I don't like things. I like things my way. I'm the user. We don't do research. Those are cases where I think clients have an opportunity to be sold on the value that research actually has. And I believe that clients that say that just haven't seen good research yet. And when they see it, they'll come see the light. So that's what I hope at Labs like we can do as well. Thank you.